would like to call this meeting of the Civilian Complaint Review Board to order. This is our September board meeting. I'm going to ask my colleagues on the board if they would mute their phones until it is time for them to speak. I am Fred Davey. I'm the chair of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and I would like to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves to you if they would. So I will start with Ms. Pinsky.
Hi all, my name is Angela Pinsky. I am a mayoral appointee on the CCRB and I reside in Brooklyn.
Thank you. Did Ms. Irish join us? Not yet. Mr. Rivadeneira.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michael Rivadeneira. I am the City Council's designee to the board. I hail from the Bronx, and my pronouns are he and him.
Mr. Dwight.
My name is Frank Dwyer. I am a police commissioner representative to the CCRB board, and my pronoun is he.
Mr. Freeman.
Good evening. Good evening, Willie Freeman, police commissioner appointee.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons. Thank you. Ms. Simmons. Ms. Simmons, I think you're on mute.
Good evening, folks. Esmeralda Simmons, public advocate appointee. I hail from Bedside, Brooklyn.
Great. Is Mr. Kakatera on?
Yes, Fred. Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Sal Carcaterra, and I'm a police commissioner designate.
Thank you. Ms. Scully Butts.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Bob Ray. I go by she and her pronouns, and I'm a city council designee.
Mr. Puma.
Good evening, all. My name is Joseph Puma. My preferred pronouns are he and his, and I am the City Council designee from the Borough of Manhattan.
Did I miss anyone? Well, thank you all. And before I go further, I'd also like to note that the CCRB will hold a special board meeting next Thursday, September 17th at 4 p.m. to receive public comment on the NYPD's new disciplinary matrix. This matrix is a set of guidelines the department released last week that aims to standardize penalties for misconduct. I think, and I believe my colleagues on the board agree, that it's important for us to hear civilians' feedback on this matter. So I hope you'll join us online via WebEx next Thursday at 4. Registration details will be available on CCRB's website shortly. As some of you may know, we've carved out this evening to discuss policy as it relates to the LGBTQIA+ community. This is a conversation we initially were looking to have earlier this year, but it was postponed due to COVID-19. I'm glad that we're able to meet, albeit virtually, to talk about this very important topic tonight. The relationship between the police and the LGBTQIA+ community is complicated, to say the least. When we look back at the Stonewall uprising in 1969, we see anger and utter frustration forming the foundation of the rebellion against the NYPD's crackdown on gay bars. Fast forward 50 years, and we recently have seen the NYPD formally apologize, calling the police department's actions back then discriminatory and oppressive. In 1981, when Sergeant Charlie Cochran stood before the city council and came out as the first openly gay member of the NYPD, gay officers expected to face discrimination. In fact, when Cochran founded the Gay Officers Action League, GOAL, he received a bomb threat targeting the group's first meeting. Today, Goals still exists and continues working to create community for LGBTQ law enforcement officers and to educate their peers. That culture change follows a larger culture change within our country. The Supreme Court ruled just a few months ago that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits workplace discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. New York City, like our nation, undoubtedly has made progress on this front, but there's still work to be done. The CCRB continues to receive complaints of NYPD's officers misgendering and belittling civilians with homophobic slurs. And we know that some New Yorkers, fueled by the very fear and pain, have called for removing the NYPD from queer spaces like Pride altogether. And 1 year after Layleen Polanco's death, a tragic death on Rikers Island, after rising violence against Black trans women nationwide, we come to this evening's conversation knowing that in talking about NYPD, LGBTQIA relations, we're only scratching the surface in the conversation about the community's concerns. But we have to start somewhere, so here we are. Over the past few months, I have been encouraged by many young New Yorkers and the ways in which they are getting involved, speaking up, and interested in creating change in our communities. Young LGBTQ New Yorkers in particular, just like they did after Stonewall so many years ago, are playing a vital role in pushing for change. Keep participating, keep pushing. Finally, as some of you know, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and sadly, gay and lesbian youth seriously contemplate suicide at nearly 3 times the rate of their straight peers. As CCRB works to improve its outreach to young New Yorkers, I would be remiss if I did not take the opportunity to talk directly to any young LGBTQ person who might be listening tonight, to say to them, Corey Johnson, the Speaker of our City Council, is part of this community. Councilmember Richie Torres, who is on his way to representing the 15th Congressional District in Washington, is a part of this community. I and some of my fellow board members are part of this community. And we all stand on the shoulders of Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson and Bayard Rustin and Jean Cordova. There's power in that history. I want you to know that it does get better. It will get better. Meetings like this one, where we give the floor to members of the LGBTQIA+ community and listen to your experiences, listen to what you need, are part of making sure that it gets better. Before I turn things over to our Executive Director, Jonathan Darsh, I want to thank CCRB staff for all they're doing serving the City of New York. And on behalf of the board and on behalf of our fellow New Yorkers, I also want to thank all of our city's essential workers who continue to go to work, go out, and serve the City of New York in the face of COVID-19. To all those essential workers who have sacrificed so much on behalf of this city, I simply say tonight, thank you. Now I turn the meeting over to our Executive Director, Jonathan Darsh. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we've last met, there are a few issues I would like to update the public on. First, in the lawsuit by the police unions against the CCRB and NYPD, the federal judge hearing the case declined to impose a preliminary injunction against the CCRB. The union's appeal is being heard by the Second Circuit on September 15th. The CCRB's ability to release information to the public is currently on hold pending that decision, and we're hopeful that September 15th will end that logjam. The CCRB is working through the backlog of interviews with members of the NYPD. Weekly member of service interview numbers are close to pre-pandemic levels, and we're hoping to get them up to pre-pandemic levels as soon as we can. In addition, the NYPD is making progress on addressing our concerns over the body-worn camera backlog. As you know, the backlog was more than 1,000 requests in June, and that backlog has been reduced to approximately 100 outstanding requests right now. And I want to thank Judge Hart and his team for their assistance in this matter. I hope to have a update on the secure BWC room later this fall. CCRB is currently operating remotely as much as possible because the health of complainants, staff, and members of the NYPD remains our priority, and it informs all of our operations. Our office is open with limited staff. I strongly encourage people to contact us by telephone, email, or via our website if possible. To file a complaint, go to nyc.gov/CCRB complaint, it's all one word, or call us at 1-800-341-2272. Investigators are now able to conduct all their work, including interviews of civilians and members of the NYPD, remotely. We're expecting a lot of participation in our public comment portion of the evening. Just a reminder to use the raise your hand feature to make a comment. So please keep your comments to 2 minutes. And if you're going to discuss a problematic encounter with a member of the NYPD, please provide contact information so that our investigators can follow up with you. And you can use the Q&A feature for specific questions related to the presentations that we're going to give, but please reserve questions and comments unrelated to the presentations for the public session. I want to thank the staff for their hard work, and thanks again to all the members of the public who are going to be participating this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Dash. I'm going to ask if Ms. Irish, who's joined us, would introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Corrine Irish. I'm a Manhattan resident, Harlem. I live in Harlem. Mayoral appointee. Apologies for being late. I had a little difficulty getting online.
Thank you. And now, Yahira, are there any elected officials who are present who'd like to speak?
Yeah, first we'll be hearing from Assembly Member Bishop.
Welcome, Assembly Member.
Thank you so much, Chair, Mr. Chair Davey, and the whole board. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Assembly Member Rodney Bishop. I represent the 42nd Assembly District, which is Central Brooklyn, Flatbush, East Flatbush, and Ditmas Park. And I'm also the head of the Brooklyn Democratic Party. First, I want to once again, as usual, I want to thank the Chair Davey, and the whole CCRB board for inviting me, especially on today's topic, which is to talk about the relationship between LGBTQIA and New Yorkers and the relationships with NYPD. First of all, just so you know, I want to extend my deepest sympathy and condolences out to the family and friends of a trans woman whose body was recently found on a rooftop in my district in Flatbush. And I called on the NYPD to investigate this murder to the fullest extent and bring justice for the victims and their loved ones. Our LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and non-binary friends and family have been historically discriminated against across our country and in the very heart of our city. But New York has been at the heart of the Pride movement. As you know, the Stonewall Uprising took place in our city in response to the police brutality against LGBT community. And NYPD was raiding establishments in Greenwich Village that acted as a safe haven for this community. Unfortunately, we are here today, 50 years later, to talk about relationship between NYPD, LGBTQIA, which is still an issue. We have issues. We have young LGBT people from all over the country and the world who travel to New York to make our city their home because we are a capital for this community. We must continue to act like it by protecting the LGBTQIA friends from police brutality and discrimination. And Chair, you mentioned that, you know, we have a lot of elected officials, a lot of people who are in elected positions now. You mentioned Richie Torres, who's going to the Congress. You mentioned Corey Johnson, who's the Speaker. We have a newly elected Senate to be, Jabari Brisport from Brooklyn. We also have a number of district leaders. We have 4 district leaders in the Brooklyn Democratic Party: Josh Pierre, Ricardo Peno, Jesse Pierce, Samuel Oliveras. You know, I mean, we are having a lot more involvement when it comes to having the voices of LGBTQ community heard. And it's really important, especially addressing other issues like LGBTQ people of color that are disproportionately victims in the police complaints filed in New York City. It's my duty to stand up for everyone, especially for those who's been marginalized. There was a CCRB investigation in 2006 that showed us that complaints filed against NYPD by LGBT persons were filed predominantly by Black people, which was 49%, Hispanic people, 34%. And according to the board's report, hundreds of complaints were filed regarding cops using derogatory slurs that target LGBT people. Sex abuse is the second most common form of police misconduct. Racial profiling by police causes a school-to-prison pipeline. LGBT youth of color are more likely to be disciplined at schools, and 85% of LGBTQ youth in juvenile justice facilities are youth of color. I asked the CCRB to be the moderator in the crisis of law and conscience, and we must tell NYPD this is not acceptable behavior. In addition to citizens attack, we've seen an increasingly outspoken in the SBA, Sergeant Benevolent Association, attacking our city's gay elected officials. Just last week, we saw an unspeakable attack on again, our Bronx council member, Richie Torres. Unfortunately, the discrimination does not stop there. Under the current law, when we talk about transgender, under the current law, loitering for the purposes of engaging in prostitution is a violation for first-time offenders and misdemeanors for repeat offenders. This offense is known as walking while trans because transgender people are often charged by police based solely on their clothing and appearance. Okay, no one should be arrested simply for being present. So in the Assembly, we do have a bill that I'm a co-sponsor of, which many of you may know, Amy Paulin and Brad Hoylman, who's the sponsor of this legislation, which is to ban and to repeal the walking while trans. Trans women in New York City are regularly being stopped and accused of engaging in sex work. This is unacceptable. And lastly, I just want to say that we talked about racial profiling in the past. When Floyd versus City of New York was heard, many of our LGBT advocates were here. The Anti-Violence Project, the Andre Lord Project, Fierce, Make the Road, New York, and Streetwise and Safe were all inside of the courtroom. This is a landmark case when we're talking about addressing stop and frisk. Floyd had determined that frisks were unconstitutional. So again, as we're looking at all of these different unconstitutional behaviors and misconduct, let's not forget about why we're stopping and frisking people who look like trans, people who look like who's Black, and so forth, who are a particular religion. I just want to thank all of you who will be sharing their personal experience and who already have shared their personal experience with us today. And as your legislator, as your Democratic chair, as a civilian here in New York, I want to make sure that the law is on the right side of history. So again, thank you, Chair Davey and team, for continuing to act as the police watchdog and for standing up to injustice. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Are there any questions or comments for the Assembly Member from the board members? All right, thank you again. Jaira, do we have other elected officials who'd like to speak?
Yes, we'll be hearing from Councilmember Vanessa Gibson.
Councilmember Gibson, welcome. I see you there. There you are.
Yes, thank you so much. I'll start my video. Good evening, Chair, and good evening to each and every one of you, to our Executive Director, to the members of the CCRB, and really to all of the public, to elected officials, and everyone who's really gathered for tonight's very important hearing. I am New York City Council Member Vanessa Gibson. I represent District 16 in the Borough of the Bronx, and I am proud to serve as co-chair of the New York City Council Women's Caucus, the mighty dynamic 12 women who represent the City Council, as well as I am testifying tonight on behalf of the New York City Council LGBT Caucus. And I want to thank the CCRB for having tonight's very, very important hearing. As you know, this has been a topic of grave importance to many of the LGBTQ New Yorkers that we represent, our friends and allies in the community. And we've really come a long way. I do want to recognize a lot of progress that we have made. The New York City Council, under the leadership of our speaker, Corey Johnson, has really developed key partnerships with many of our LGBT partners like Destination Tomorrow and many others. And what we've done over the last several years was we have invested money to make sure that we can provide a curriculum to focus on the history of the LGBT community, to talk about Stonewall and a lot of the movements that have happened to fight for equity and justice in the system. Not only have we worked with the Department of Ed as one example, but the City Council has started City Council initiatives dedicated to focusing on healthcare, mental health services, as well as LGBT housing for New Yorkers across the city. So I'm very proud of how far we've come. Now, although we've come far, we've made great strides, we do have a long way to go. And that is really the purpose of tonight's hearing, to hear from our friends in the LGBT community on their concerns, their issues, priorities, and I'm a big fan of solutions on what we can do as a community to work together. The CCRB has a very important role, and contrary to what some may say, the work is instrumental in our overall goal to build partnerships. Now, I know things are not perfect. We've been dealing with the pandemic of COVID-19, pandemic of systemic racism, and we've also been dealing with the pandemic of gun violence over the summer and the warm season, when we've seen far too many youth and many of our Black, trans men and women who've been assaulted as well as killed because of who they are and their identity. And that is unacceptable. And I know we can all agree that we can do better. The rhetoric is irrelevant and it is counterproductive. We have got to be about our business, and we have got to be about protecting LGBT New Yorkers. That is our fundamental goal in the council, and we are proud to work with the CCRB. We have done a lot of work, Chair, as you know, to make sure that CCRB is available to the outer boroughs like the Bronx, so we don't have to go downtown to Church Street. 311, we've hosted CCRB in many of our district offices pre-COVID, where residents can come and file complaints. We have done a lot to make it easier for residents to come to CCRB. And so I appreciate that. CCRB on the road, taking it to the outer boroughs to make sure that everyday residents understand the work you do, but they also understand that they have a role to play as well. They should never be victims in silence and silenced in the darkness. And if they have an issue with their police, they have to come forward. But we have to make it easier, and we have to give them a level of comfort. And so I appeal to you, CCRB, as you continue to do this work in the administration, that we look at creative and innovative ways, the outreach, taking it to local churches and CBOs and community centers and safe spaces where our constituents feel comfortable coming forward to all of you. So tonight I offer testimony on behalf of the New York City Council Women's Caucus, as well as the LGBT Caucus, on behalf of them. So we thank the CCRB for holding tonight's hearing on how we can continue to build relationships and ensure justice and safety for all New Yorkers, regardless of their race, their gender, identity, or sexual orientation. As we examine the relationship between the LGBTQIA+ New Yorkers and the NYPD, we urgently advocate for the passage of Resolution 0923 of 2019, which calls on the state legislature to repeal the New York Penal Law, Section 240.37. This statute is commonly referred as the Walking While Trans ban, and it criminalizes loitering for the purpose of engaging in prostitution. The repeal of this law is fundamental in protecting the LGBTQIA+ community from discriminatory police profiling. As it stands, the Walking While Trans ban empowers police officers to arbitrarily arrest New Yorkers for behaviors that they may deem indicative of sex work, simply as standing on the street or wearing a skirt that is far too short. Officers have admitted to using Adam's apples and visible bra straps as a justification for many of these arrests. Trans women in particular, especially trans women of color, have been targeted by this archaic and unjust law for decades. Since 2018, there has been a 120% increase in arrests under this law, with 3/4 of these arrests made on Black and Latina trans women. In addition, according to the NYPD, their own precinct data, the majority of these arrests occur in only 5 precincts in the city of New York, and as you suspect, all predominantly Black and brown communities of color. By allowing the Walking While Trans ban to stand, we allow for this continued mistreatment and criminalization of the LGBTQIA+ community, which is already uniquely vulnerable and marginalized to violence and discrimination. As both lawmakers and residents and citizens, we all have an obligation and a responsibility to stand up in the face of inequality and inequity and ensure fair treatment for every New Yorker. Repealing this outdated and discriminatory law is a definitive and concrete step forward in the right direction towards a safer future for our trans women of color. Resolution 0923 already has the support of 30 council members. I'm so thankful, and growing, including all members of the Women's Caucus, the Mighty 12, and the LGBT Caucus, in addition to a broad coalition of activists and experts who are awaiting a hearing in the City Council. We also want to thank many of my colleagues in the council, as well as the Walking While Trans Ban Coalition of providers and organizations and advocates that have come forward to help us get this ban repealed. So we hope that the CCRB will hear us, support us in our fight, and join us in taking a stand for all of our transgender friends, neighbors, and constituents. So I thank you. That was really the priority of the Women's Caucus and the LGBT Caucus at this time. But I do again want to thank CCRB and all of the members of the public who testified tonight so that we can continue to work together. The final thing I do want to say, because it's my borough of the Bronx, but I really want to recognize Destination Tomorrow, who has started this great work with the Bronx LGBT Center. Many of you know that for years, 13 years to be exact, we had no LGBT center in the borough of the Bronx. It was defunct with no activity. But thankfully, this city council and the LGBT caucus saw fit to make sure that we not only made it happen, but we put dollars where our commitment is. And so thank you, Destination Tomorrow, for your leadership and really all of our LGBT advocates for all of your work. I thank you for your time tonight, Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Council Member. We always appreciate your support, and particularly we appreciate the way you, the members of the Council, the Women's Caucus, and the LGBT Caucus are standing with our LGBT family here in New York, and particularly trans women and trans persons in general, and trans women of color more specifically. So thank you. Thank you for all you do. Are there any questions or comments for the Council Member? All right. Thanks again, Council Member.
Thank you so much, Chair.
For sure. Yahira, are there other elected officials with us tonight?
Mr. Chair, I was hoping I could just address one thing that Assemblywoman Bishop mentioned, and that is that the agency has received a complaint about Sergeant Mullen's comments on behalf of the SBA about Councilmember Torres, and has commenced an investigation about those comments. So I'm going to ask the members of the board not to comment on it because we do have an active investigation into the statement.
Thank you, Mr. Josh. Thank you, John. So Yahira, other elected officials.
Yes, now we will be hearing from a representative from Councilmember Carolina Rivera's office, Isabel Chandler.
Will the Ms. Chandler, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. My name is Isabel Chandler, and I'm sharing testimony on behalf of New York City Councilwoman Carolina Rivera. Thank you to the Civilian Complaint Review Board for the opportunity to speak, and to my colleagues of the Women's Caucus and LGBT Caucus for their testimony and unwavering commitment to justice for the most marginalized. We know that for members of the LGBTQIA+ community, interactions with police officers can be deadly. Transgender people are 7 times more likely to experience physical violence when interacting with police than cisgender people. This year has also been particularly painful as we reckon with a surge of violence against transgender people in the United States. In July of this year, the recorded number of transgender people murdered surpassed the total for the entirety of 2019. This June, Nikki Stickers Stone was brutally arrested by the NYPD in a manner the mayor later deemed, quote, wrong. In addition, it was recently announced that the family of Layleen Polanco, a trans woman of color who died in solitary confinement at Rikers Island, will receive a settlement of $5.9 million, nearly 15 months after her tragic and preventable death. It's clear that our city must do more to prevent, not simply react to, profound violence against the LGBTQIA+ community. City Council Resolution 923, which calls on New York State to repeal the walking while trans ban, is a small step in the series of many that we can take to make New York a more equitable and safe place for all. For decades, New York law enforcement has arrested individuals suspected of, quote, engaging in prostitution on the basis of what they are wearing and where they are walking. Section 240.37 of the New York Penal Law targets trans women of color for merely existing in public space. This law is not only legally abhorrent and morally unacceptable, but more importantly, this law can permanently affect people's lives. If arrested and convicted under loitering laws, individuals are ineligible for public housing for at least 4 years, can face deportation, and are unable to have the charges sealed from their record. If we allow the Walking While Trans ban to stand, we remain complicit in the active discrimination against and mistreatment of trans women of color. All New Yorkers deserve to walk the streets without fear of being profiled by law enforcement. I'm proud to have introduced Resolution 923, and as we advocate for a council hearing, work to pass the bill in Albany, I hope the CCRB will join me in calling to end the Walking While Trans ban once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any of the board members? Thank you again for your remarks. And I will ask Yahira if there are other elected officials or their representatives who would like to speak.
No one else. I would just like to acknowledge that staff members from the following offices are present. Assemblymember Al Taylor, Assemblymember Inez Dickens, Assemblymember Frontis, and also Assemblymember Lentil, and Senator Brian Benjamin. Thank you.
Thank you, Yahira, and we welcome those staff representing those elected officials. Thank you. I'll now ask if we can have a presentation from the policy department at the CCRB, Nicole Napolitano, who's the Director of Policy and Advocacy. Nicole.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I'm going to share my screen and open up a PowerPoint here. Let's see if I can. Here we go. All right. So this presentation is about CCRB complaints and LGBTQIA complainants. Oops. There. So just to start out and give a little bit of context, the CCRB's tracking of gender identity and sexual orientation has evolved a bit over the past few years. All of our demographic data is self-reported. Investigators don't actually ask complainants about sexual orientation, but if it comes up, if the complainant discloses it, they do record that information. The demographic data options that are available for reporting have changed over time as well. So in 2015, we began to record sexual orientation with options straight, gay or lesbian, bisexual, and other. In 2015, we also added trans man and trans woman to the prior gender options of male and female. And in 2017, we added gender nonconforming as a gender option as well. This map indicates the precincts with the highest proportion of self-identified LGBTQIA complainant victims from complaints received for a 3-year period, 2017, 2018, and 2019. And you'll note that some of the hotspot precincts include the 76th, 33rd, 115th, 6th, 78th, 19th, 71st, 14th, and 72nd precincts. Now I've highlighted here in red the 76th, which has the highest proportion of complainants that identified as LGBTQIA to us, the CCRB, and the highest raw number came from the 14th precinct. The 76 is Carroll Gardens, Red Cobble Hill, and parts of Gowanus. The 14th is Midtown South, so it's Times Square, Grand Central, Penn Station, Madison Square Garden. And these are calculated out of the proportion of all of the complainants from those particular precincts. We're working on ways to improve our recording of this information and ways to reach out to community and advocacy groups to help us to continue to refine how we track complaints that are related to LGBTQIA communities. We are working as well on learning more about how the CCRB can better engage with and earn the trust of members of LGBTQIA communities, so the people who have experienced police misconduct can feel safe filing a complaint. You may have noticed that the number of complainants who identified as LGBTQIA it's not a very high raw number. And so we want to work with these communities to make sure that they know that they can come to the CCRB when they experience negative incidents with police and police misconduct. Where possible, we're also beginning to study long-term trends in complaints that might help illuminate areas of concern and better illustrate intersectional issues, including issues of race and ethnicity, as well as age and housing status. So the CCRB has a whole bunch of data at nyc.gov/DTI. There's a feedback form on there to contact the policy unit. If you have comments or questions, we're currently working on a complete revamp of the DTI, and we would love to hear from the public to let us know what kinds of data points they'd like to see and in what ways. So if you have any feedback there, please do use that form to get in touch with us. Our policy reports are available at nyc.gov/CCRB reports. There is a report that we put out on the LGBTQ community and their interactions with the NYPD in our complaints in 2016. The policy unit is working on data to update the findings that came from that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Are there any questions from board members or comments? All right, hearing none, we will now have a presentation on outreach from Jahai Rose, who's the Deputy Director of Outreach and Intergovernmental Affairs. Jahai.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Davey. Just going to share my screen. Okay, thank you all. My name is Jahai Rose. I'm the Deputy Director of Outreach and Intergovernmental Affairs. We would like to just provide, for those that may not know, some information regarding the CCRB's role and responsibility, and some brief information regarding the Right to Know Act. So the CCRB is the Civilian Complaint Review Board. We are the city's largest independent oversight entity of the New York City Police Department in the country, overseeing the New York City Police Department. The CCRB is responsible for investigating, mediating, and prosecuting complaints of misconduct against members of the New York City Police Department. You have met members of our board today. The full board is, the agency is governed by the full board, which is a 15-member body with 5 seats appointed by the New York City Mayor, 5 seats appointed by the New York City Council. The 5 appointees to the New York City Council all represent individual boroughs. 3 designees are designated by the New York City Police Commissioner. There's 1 appointee that is appointed by the Public Advocate, the New York City Public Advocate, and the chair is jointly appointed by the Mayor and the New York City Council. While we do investigate allegations of police misconduct, we have a very specific jurisdiction. A helpful reminder for you to remember what that jurisdiction is using the acronym called FATO. So FATO stands for F, which is force. Any force used during the commission of a police interaction by a New York City police officer can be investigated by our agency. Our agency will use the law and the New York City Police Patrol Guide to determine if the force used by the officer was in fact excessive and or unnecessary and or justified. The second category is one of our larger categories, which is abuse of authority. Abuse of authority can include an improper search, an improper stop, could include a police officer calling ICE on an individual, police officers are refusing or failure to provide their name and badge number, and or a police officer refusing to provide a business card if required to do so. The next category is discourtesy. Discourtesy may look like a police officer using a profanity towards a civilian, and or a police officer using a discourteous gesture. Last but certainly not least, offensive language, which would be an officer using a language that inappropriately refers to an individual's race, religion, sexual orientation, a gender identity, and or a disability status. So for those that may not know, the Right to Know Act, the Right to Know Act is a law that took effect in October 19 of 2018. The law impacts how police officers interact with members of the public. Some of the components of the Right to Know Act include a police officer identifying themselves by their name and other information such as rank, command, and shield number. In certain circumstances, or with some exemptions, the officer should be explaining the law enforcement interaction. In some circumstances, the officer may have to notify an individual of their ability to say no when asking for consent to search a person's property, a vehicle, or an individual's home. And in other circumstances, a police officer may be required to offer a business card with the officer's information that explains how to make a comment and or complaint. And about an interaction with the police officer, civilians may request a business card in any and all interactions. This is an example of what the business card may look like. So there are a few ways for you to be able to make a complaint regarding a police misconduct. To name two specific, one is by making the complaint online at nyc.gov/CCRB complaint. Also, you could call our office at 1-800-341-CCRB. Now, in a recent update, you do have an ability now to be able to make a complaint about misconduct if you see misconduct or on social media or in the news. And you can file the complaint even if you weren't there in person to witness the interaction. A few other ways for you to be able to make a complaint is also by calling 311. You could also make the complaint in person by coming to our local office, or you could visit a local police precinct. You could also make the complaint to our office by mail by sending a letter to 100 Church Street, 10th floor, New York, New York, zip code 10007. So if you'd like to, the CCRB's outreach team is responsible for conducting public public education to members of the public. So if you'd like to request a presentation, you can feel free to contact us via email at outreach@ccrb.nyc.gov, or you could also follow us on Instagram at ccrb_NYC, Twitter at ccrb_NYC, or on Facebook. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jahai. Any questions or comments from our members of the board? All right. Thank you, Jahai, and to the outreach and intergovernmental team for the many ways in which you engage the community and public officials around the work of the agency. Yahaira, we have community groups who are prepared to speak.
Yes, we'll first be hearing from Jabari Brisport, followed by Sage Rivera.
Please go ahead. Was it Jabari Bridgeport? You are there. Go ahead.
There seems to be some audio issues with Jabari, so we'll go next to Sage Rivera.
All right. Sage Rivera, please go ahead. You are muted, Sage Rivera. There you are.
Hi, you guys hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Sage Rivera. I'm the Director of Programs for Destination Tomorrow, the LGBTQ Center of the Bronx. Destination Tomorrow is currently, as of last week, the only LGBTQ community center that is offering in-person services on a limited basis here in New York City. And those in-person services are available by appointment for those community members interested. Everything from case management and referral to intake and HIV counseling and testing. As Vanessa Gibson said, we are the LGBTQ Center of the Bronx, and I did prepare something, but the council member did see a lot of things that I just don't want to be redundant on, but just emphasize the importance of. And the guide of how the kind of CCRB make people from the LGBTQIA communities feel safer with filing complaints. I'll begin with, I would say it begins with a brainstorming of what it means to create a presence within the LGBTQ community, and begin to show that the CCRB is invested in being present for the LGBTQ community and establish what it means to create authentic partnerships. That also includes finding ways to educate the LGBTQ community on what the process is of filing a complaint to what happens to it after it is filed. And also being transparent around the process being LGBTQ affirming and welcoming, making sure that whoever's answering the phone, that operators are aware of LGBTQ issues, and from operators to front desk people, should complaints be made in person. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. It was great to see also the presentation around CCRB next steps, especially when it pointed out with working with LGBTQIA community organizations. I want to say that showing up is part of the solution. And we look forward to seeing you. Vanessa Gibson coined the phrase of CCRB on the road, and visiting the various LGBTQIA advocacy and CBO organizations would be very fruitful in creating the solutions that we want to see in establishing an effective connection with the community. Also probably examining what it is to create maybe outreach material or propaganda that would be LGBTQI specific, that other law agencies within the city. We have a great relationship with sort of like with Bronx Legal Aid Services that do something as simple as create paper flyers for legal services that are generalized but can benefit people of the LGBTQ community. Perhaps something like brochures, flyers that talk about what was in the presentation before this one around, sorry, that includes FADO and the Right to Know Act for LGBTQ people, or posters that we can post here at a community center so more community members can be aware of and engage the CCRB. And thinking about community relation issues and what to examine in the future, here at Destination Tomorrow, we echo the sentiment around addressing the walking wild trans ban and other things that probably can be included in the educational material or in these visits of CCRB on the road, whether it be in person or in light of what we're facing right now within the pandemic, virtually. There are a lot of things going on. Pride is not the only time to come out and engage the LGBTQI community. There are events going on. I would encourage subscriptions into listservs, checking out calendars, and seeing where else outreach can be done. There is always, in our experience, a great relationship from the LGBTQ outreach unit on behalf of the police department, but we would like to get more engagement from our local police departments and see who's there and their interest and in their investment in our community. And the meeting opened with the acknowledgement of the Gay Officers Action League and perhaps them visiting or being included in those visits. We would love to be engaged by them and talk about the work that they do and sort of create community between our community organization and that entity. So yeah, so that's everything that I have. Thank you so much for having us. And again, you can reach us at www.destinationtomorrow.org.
Thank you. We're very pleased to hear of the reopening of the Bronx LGBT Center and under your leadership. So thank you. And I'm sure that capacity issues not being an issue at some point in the future, when we are looking for spaces to hold public meetings in all of the boroughs, we would hope that your center might be a place where we might hold one of those public meetings. And I think you probably know the Bronx representative from the board, Mr. Rivadeneira, and I'm sure he can well represent the board with you and your constituencies as well. So thank you for your comments. Any comments or questions from members of the board? Mr. Rivadeneira.
Chair, I just wanted to thank Sage and Destiny Tomorrow for just being a critical service here in the Bronx. They're a phenomenal organization, and I've worked really well with them in other capacities, both government side and nonprofit side, so they're an amazing organization.
Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thanks again. And Yahira, I will ask you if there are other community groups or organizations that want to speak.
Yes, we will try Jabari one more time. And while we queue that up, just want to acknowledge that Chantel Cabrera from Senator Brian Kavanaugh is here, is present, as well as Chantel from Chantel Cabrera from Senator Brian Kavanaugh's office, and Latoya LeGrand from Senator Leroy Comrie, as well as John Blasco from Speaker Johnson's office.
Excellent. From all of you representing public officials. Now I see Jabari Brisport. You'll need to unmute, and the floor is yours. There you are. Now unmute. We had you on camera. There you are.
Hope you can all okay. I want to thank you all for having me on here. Thank you to the chairman, and thank you to the rest of the board members and the staff and committee. My name is Jabari Brisport. I'm the senator-elect or incoming state senator for the 25th State Senate District in Brooklyn, New York. That's central Brooklyn, a lot of Bed-Stuy, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Prospect Heights, Boerum Hill, Red Hook, and surrounding neighborhoods. And I'm extremely thankful for y'all creating this space and having this discussion. For those who don't know, I am the first openly gay state legislator of color in the New York State Legislature's history. And it is important that we are making this space right now. We have too many issues. As you've heard already so many times, I don't need to reiterate it, but the criminalization of sex work, the criminalization of being a trans woman or a trans woman of color needs to stop. And I'm going to be short in my words. I'm very thankful for the space. I'm very upset to hear about the loss of proposed loss of funding at the CCRB, especially knowing it would be a rounding error in the NYPD budget to fully fund the CCRB. That makes no sense to me. But this is an important discussion to have. I'm looking forward to hearing more testimonies, and I appreciate having a fruitful relationship and working together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations on your race and campaign, and the historic nature of your role that you'll play in the assembly. And thank you for your support of the CCRB as well. So thank you. Let me see if there are any comments or questions from my colleagues. All right, hearing none. Yahira, others to speak.
Yeah, next we'll be hearing from Reg Calcagno, the Senior Director of Governmental Affairs from the LGBTQ Center.
Great. Please go ahead. I think you need to unmute.
Hi there. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address the board tonight, and thank you for dedicating time during your meeting tonight to discuss this important issue. My name is Reg Calcagno, and I'm the Senior Director of Government Affairs for the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Community Center. New York City's LGBT community formed the center in 1983 in response to the AIDS epidemic, ensuring a place for LGBT people to access information, care, and support that they were not receiving elsewhere. And now the largest LGBT multi-service organization on the East Coast, we provide services to hundreds of individuals each month. The history of disrespect, violence, and danger that the NYPD has subjected members of the LGBT community, particularly Black transgender women, to is long and storied. We know that this body is very familiar with the challenges faced by the LGBT community and know that you have made some very specific recommendations to the NYPD. However, despite recommendations made by this body in the 2016 report and the follow-up report by the Office of the Inspector General in 2017, LGBTQ community members, particularly Black and brown trans women, continue to report intimidation and harassment by officers throughout the city. It is also our understanding that interactions with the police continue to be underreported despite calls for increased transparency and accountability. The NYPD's words and promises of reform, accountability, and care for the general public ring hollow. On the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion, former Commissioner O'Neill apologized for the abuse of the legal actions of the NYPD, and 1 year later, June 28, 2020, we witnessed NYPD officers scream at, shove, and pepper spray protesters who had gathered for the Queer Liberation March for Black Lives. You've asked us to address how the CCRB can make our community feel safer filing complaints. We, like many groups who address this body, want our concerns to be heard, and we want them to be acted upon. The LGBT community, like other communities, wants to know that when there's a substantiated complaint against the NYPD, that the body that issues that finding has the authority to create restorative justice for the aggrieved party. With the repeal of 50A earlier this year, we have learned just how much the Commissioner and the NYPD are not interested in accountability. While the Center supports increasing the authority of the CCRB to be able to hold officers who violate their oaths, abuse their authority, and overstep their roles accountable, we do not want the conversation to end there. We are having conversations both within our organization and with other groups about what reimagining community support, accountability, and restorative justice looks like. We understand the tremendous undertaking that the CCRB has and respect and appreciate how hard each of you have advocated for the LGBTQ community. The simple act of changing your forms several years ago so that your investigators can address people with the correct name and pronouns means that you see us. The fact that you allow for anonymous complaints means that you recognize that LGBT people may be subject to retaliation for filing a sexual assault or harassment claim against an officer. Sharing these changes and introducing yourselves to the LGBTQ community is a key way to let the community know that you are ready to be a partner. We are truly grateful for what you've undertaken, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you. We would welcome the opportunity to facilitate another town hall conversation similar to the one held at the center in 2016 upon the city reopening eventually, and thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you, and we appreciate this partnership. We will take you up on that offer at some point along the way to have another one of those public conversations. I want to just express my appreciation for your work, the work of the staff, and the work of your Executive Director, Glenda Testone, as well. So please pass that along. Let me, before you go, see if my colleagues have any questions or comments. All right. Thank you for your work, and we'll look forward to continuing the partnership. Thank you. All right, Yahira?
Next, we'll be hearing from Kels Howell from Queen's Pride.
Please go ahead.
Hello, hi everyone.
Hi.
My name is Kels, or Kelvin. I am the Director of Operations for Queen's Pride. I want to thank you all for being on tonight. To everyone, I want to give a special thank you to Tim Harrell for reaching out to me to be a part of this, and thank you guys for bringing this back. So the first thing that I would like to go, I would like to say to everyone, you know, there keeps being a mention of a transgender woman that was that lost her life in Orchard in the Bronx, and she has a name, so I want to share her name with the group. So everyone is aware. Her name was Allie, and so one thing about community, when people speak on things, we need to do our due diligence and find out who people are. So everything is about identity and being an entity and being a person. That's very big for any community. So it's been in the tabloids, it's been on social media. Her name has been released to the public by the police department. She has a name. And that's very traumatic to a community when we have people of high stature that are speaking and do not even know the individual's name. It's very problematic. That's one thing. So moving forward, it would be strongly advised when speaking of something of such magnitude, of someone, that we find out who the someone was. That was someone's child, that was someone's daughter, that was someone's sister, that was someone's aunt, that was someone's niece. It's very profound. The second thing of the matter is it's very nice to see, I don't want to take it out of context. It's not saying that every time the trans community wants to move forward, we're going to ask a specific act. However, in the leadership of the CCRB, we do need trans visibility. You know, it's a whole for us, by us movement. You know, if we don't see us in leadership, that's a concern, because when people are in roles of leadership within any entity, we know that the person has had to embody difficult conversations. They have had to walk in the room. They have had to fight their way through to stay in their seat or stay in their position. Granted, it's, oh, you know, you guys can just write like a job description to create a specific job just for someone that's trans or whatever. It's just saying in the hiring process, let's make sure we have candidates that are going for jobs, that are sitting on these type of arenas, that are in role of leadership. A lot of the times we think because we have someone that's lesbian that meets it. No, it does not. Because we have someone that is gay, it meets it. No, we do not. Because we have someone that is bisexual. No, we do not. The T cannot be a lowercase t. The T is a capital T. And we need to, and we look to you guys as leaders and to other people on the call to protect and make space for that T to sit at the table. Having a seat at the table is everything. That's the only way to advance change. The last thing, to be fair to everyone, is with the, I understand legalities around certain stuff, but no, prostitution it's sex work, not prostitution. Language is key to this thing here. It is sex work, and I know the city is having issues with funding and things like that, but we need more funding for transgender and gender non-conforming people. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. Food pantries can do but so much. You know, if someone was actively working in sex work before the pandemic, they can't just stop all of a sudden because it's a pandemic. We can't keep saying we want to advance people and we're not giving people opportunities for education, for jobs. That's the only way to advance people. I am someone that's gender non-conforming. I am someone that's been arrested and done time. I am someone that has done sex work. I am also someone that's earned 2 undergrad degrees. I am someone that's been in the shelter system in New York City. I am someone that's been homeless. I am someone that's suffered and survived sexual assault. But there's been people and leaders in community that have poured into me to help me advance, to now being able to be working on my master's in social work. So the opportunities that were given to me, I need from my sisters, but it's people that are sitting on this call like you guys and other leaders in community that have to create the opportunity. It's not a handout. We need you guys. We depend on you to help us kick the door. And we have so many sisters and trans brothers that are knowledgeable, that have wisdom, that have skills, that can do the work. We just need an opportunity. I love you all. Thank you so much. Positive vibes to everyone. Stay safe and COVID love and all that good stuff, and stay social distance. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions or comments.
Mr. Chair, can I address the
Sure. Sure, John. Ms. Dark.
I just wanted to point out that the CCRB is still planning on hiring, and we are conducting interviews. And if there are people in the LGBTQ community, and as the previous speaker said, capital T, if there are people who want to work at the CCRB, would welcome them and hope that they would apply. And you can apply on our website.
Thank you, John. It's Mr. Darsh. And I also want to note that there are 2 open seats on the CCRB at the moment, one for Queens, and the mayor has another appointee that is another seat that is open. So that could present some opportunities as well. But thank you so much for your comments. So, Yahira, are there other speakers?
Yes, we have 2 more speakers from the community groups. Next we'll be hearing from AC Damlal, Program Manager for Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, followed by Ahmed Mohammed.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is AC Dumlao, and I am a bisexual, transgender, non-binary person who uses they, them pronouns. I'm also a first-generation American and child of Filipino immigrants, as well as a lifelong New Yorker, born in and currently living in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. And as mentioned, I'm the program manager at the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, or TILDEF. At TILDEF, our litigation team recently settled a lawsuit that resulted in a mid-sized jail in Steuben County, New York, adopting what may be the nation's most progressive policy about trans inmates. So we are very thankful to be invited to speak today at this board meeting. In my personal programs work with the Meme Change Project, I frequently communicate with trans New Yorkers, the majority of whom are people of color, living under the poverty line, who have been subject to negative interactions with the police, as many have mentioned. Many of our formerly incarcerated participants have their records due to survival crimes, such as sex work, as both Kels and Jabari mentioned, which are all related to poverty. And so I'm also appreciative of the testimony before me in support of the Walking Wild Trans appeal. To be here today, I was asked to answer a few questions, and so I'm going to be pivoting to some kind of direct logistical recommendations. So in order to make a transgender person feel safer filing a complaint, we have recommendations for the CCRB complaint form as it is currently online, which I most recently visited on your website today. And so first, we recommend asking for a person's chosen name in addition to their legal name for all people filling out the form. Currently, if you go to the form, the option for preferred name is in a drop-down, and it only appears if a person identifies themselves as transgender or not specified. We also ask the same for asking everyone's pronouns. And then for the drop-down for gender, which currently differentiates between male and trans man and female and trans woman, there's then the catch-all group, quote, not specified. So I just wanted to point this out. This differs from the Policy and Advocacy Department's presentation from earlier, which had mentioned a gender nonconforming option. So if I myself were filling out this form, I would be picking not specified as opposed to gender nonconforming or non-binary, which currently aren't options on the online form. As for the CCRB to further look into, back to the online form, I want to stress the importance that we are in this remote time during COVID, and so having this online form updated and inclusive of trans identities is something that can make a person feel safer and more likely for the complainant to complete their filing. On a larger scale, as Sage had mentioned before me a few people ago, Many trans people don't know what filing a complaint is or what it entails. And so to reiterate from before, trans people need to know if an officer misgenders them, uses transphobic or homophobic slurs at them or around them, sexually harasses them. Anecdotally, there is a feeling of that's just the way police officers are, or that's to be expected. And I just need to emphasize that that is unacceptable behavior, as I believe everyone on this call knows. Finally, we'd love to request an update to the CCRB's language access plan. I don't know the status of the plan, but as is on the website, the last update that the public can see is from 2014. Again, in this remote time of COVID-19, it's critical that New Yorkers can reach you in a timely manner, especially online, no matter what language they speak. In closing, I'm available to answer any questions. You can learn more about us at TILDEF on our website, tldef.org. And thank you again for the invitation to speak here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. We appreciate your review of the website and the suggestions you've made about ways in which we might make it more trans and gender nonconforming and gender non-binary appropriate. John, do you have anything you'd like to say about this at all?
So I think it is a sign that we as an agency, this is why this meeting is so important, so we can hear from communities and make sure that we are addressing their concerns. And, we can change how we do the drop downs. We can make it more inviting to trans people so that they feel safe and comfortable completing their complaint forms. The suggestions the speaker made were, I believe, are things that we should be able to implement fairly quickly. And then with the language access plan, we should update that as well, and we'll get working on that as soon as the meeting's over. Fred, I think you need to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Comments or questions from any of the other board members? All right, thank you. Yahira, other speakers?
We may have lost Ahmed Mohammed, so we can proceed to the public session and we will see if they are able to log back on.
All right. And I think you probably have a list of speakers then for public comment?
Yes. First, we'll be hearing from Deborah Lolai from the Bronx Defenders.
Okay. And I will remind all the speakers to please keep your comments to 2 minutes or less, because we have a lot of people who want to speak tonight. And then the board has additional business to do after the public comment. So again, please keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. All right, to our first speaker.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Loloi, and I am a public defender and the supervising attorney of the LGBTQ Defense Project at the Bronx Defenders. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Our office has represented hundreds of LGBTQ people in criminal cases. As many of you have mentioned this evening, the NYPD has a record of abusing LGBTQ New Yorkers, and particularly transgender, gender nonconforming, intersex, and non-binary people throughout history, which is a part of the reason CCRB collects this specific data. As a result of this pattern of abuse, the NYPD Patrol Guide was revised in 2012 to include protections for transgender people specifically who are arrested. Those revisions require the NYPD to offer the most basic dignity to transgender people. For example, it requires that they respect people's names and pronouns, that they place them in holding cells consistent with their gender identity. It requires that they refrain from harassing them or using derogatory language towards them. But I'm here to set the record straight about what happens on the ground in real life. Out of the hundreds of transgender clients I have represented in criminal cases, there has not been one client whose arrest and treatment by the involved officers complied with these 2012 revisions. Our clients are routinely profiled by the police throughout the course of their arrest. They're physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, called derogatory names, placed in the wrong holding cells, and misgendered orally and in police paperwork. It's very nice that the NYPD apologized for what they said 50 years ago, or what they did 50 years ago, but when are they going to apologize for what they continue to do today? When are they going to stop doing what they're continuing to do today? You know, there's really no body of people, agency, or group who victimize Black trans people more than the NYPD in New York City. And I know we talked a lot about Black trans people being victimized in New York City and in this country as a whole. And unless further action is taken to ensure that LGBTQ people are treated with dignity and respect by the NYPD, the department is going to continue to perpetuate this violence against LGBT people who are arrested. Thank you.
So I would encourage you and others to continue to file complaints with the CCRB so that we can investigate these allegations, and where there are patterns that continue either in specific precincts or communities, we can make that known to the NYPD, as we also make recommendations for any substantiated allegations against the officers. Please, if these things are occurring as you say they are, then I would encourage, in addition to whatever other legal action you may be pursuing, please file a complaint with the CCRB. For our next speaker, Yahira.
Next, we'll be hearing from Julia Peitzer.
Mic test.
Yes, speaker, you can go ahead.
You hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes,
please
you can hear me. Can you hear me too? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Julia Peitzer. My pronouns are she, her. I am an out queer-identified trans woman, and I am also the Assistant Director of Generation Q, an LGBTQ drop-in youth center in Forest Hills, Queens. I'd like to thank the CCRB for having this meeting and giving us a chance to speak. I apologize for my lack of a functional camera. I am currently experiencing technical issues. As a professional that works with queer middle schoolers, high schoolers, and early college students, there are times I find myself working, at least on the periphery, with the mental health issues of our youth. As mentioned throughout this meeting, LGBT youth are particularly at risk for mental health issues, and the data shows this is primarily due to a lack of acceptance in society, among parents, and among peers. Most of my youth are transgender or non-binary identified. Many of them have, over their lives, struggled with depression and suicidality. In the moments in which I've had to invoke an emergency medical response for one of my youth requiring psychiatric care due to suicidality, I find myself in a dual role. My first role, of course, is to ensure the safety and comfort of my youth. The second role, and the unacceptable role, is to coach and calm first responding law enforcement officers before they even enter my workplace when responding to a youth in crisis. In moments of law enforcement involvement during mental health crises, I have seen officers arrive with riot shields and their hands on their thankfully holstered weapons. I've had them choose to remain silent or fail to treat a gender-expansive youth the same as a cisgender youth when faced simply with pronouns that are unfamiliar to the NYPD. The reality is stark and it is bleak. A psychiatric hospitalization can be one of the worst experiences of a child's life. My work in this moment should be focused on the comfort of my youth, not on the comfort of the NYPD. The mental health response training and LGBTQ competency training that the NYPD is utilizing is devastatingly insufficient, and it harms our youth. Funding must be redirected from militarized equipment and anti-protester deterrence and towards community engagement, comprehensive officer training, and mental health first response. Offering a 50-year too late apology for the actions taken by the NYPD at Stonewall is at best lip service, and the NYPD must put its money where its mouth is to demonstrate a true solidarity with the LGBTQ community, and particularly with our youth. I'd like to thank again the CCRB for the chance to speak. The work you do for the community and for New York City is not only necessary, it is invaluable and critical. Generation Q can be contacted at generation_Q on Instagram and at Facebook at facebook.com/generationqrules. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any comments or questions from our members? Before we proceed, I see that Mr. Siegel has joined us. Would you like to introduce yourself? I think you need to unmute.
With embarrassment at being so late and being called out by the chair, I apologize for my tardiness. I also haven't seen Mr. Rivadeneira lately. I love the hair. My name's John Siegel. I'm a board member, and I'm glad to be here. And again, I apologize for my tardiness, but appreciate hearing from the community testimony tonight.
Thank you. And it was not the chair's intention to call you out, but simply.
Nevertheless, it had that impact. Because, you know, I know that it was between 6:30 and 7:30, and I was at 7:30, but at least I am present.
No worries. We're glad you're here. And keep going, and you and Michael can run the race on the ground.
Fred, I was hoping I could just address one issue the prior speaker had brought up, how the NYPD and how the city responds to people in mental and emotional crisis are some of the toughest cases that the CCRB addresses. I know many board members have spent a lot of time on those cases trying to figure out better responses. And I think that it's important for, it's an issue that we've addressed generally, how the department responds to people in mental and emotional distress. But there are probably additional issues that members of the LGBTQ community face when they are in mental and emotional distress. And I think it's important for us to recognize that and try and address those issues as best we can as an agency.
Thank you, John. And clearly it's important for the agency to be as sensitive and competent in these areas as we possibly can. And there's always room for the agency to improve as well. And I appreciate your and the staff's acknowledgement of that and the continuous ways in which you look to be as responsive to the community as possible. So thanks for those comments. Anyone else? All right, Yahira, our next speaker.
Next up, we have Jay Walker, followed by Lizzie Alvarado.
The speaker can go ahead.
Hello, W. Walker. I'm one of the lead organizers and founding members of the Reclaim Pride Coalition, which produces the Queer Liberation March for the last couple of years and will continue to do so. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate the CCRB's doing this forum for the LGBTQ communities. Over the course of this period of reckoning, the one thing that cannot be denied is the importance of intersectionality, the fact that the Venn diagram of racism, homophobia, transphobia, and misogyny, the overlap there is enormous. And we see time and time again how often members of the NYPD reside within that overlapping space between all of those isms and phobias. in 2016, December of 2016, right after the presidential election, a group of young queer activists having a Christmas party was set upon by a group of Proud Boys, followers of Donald Trump. Right after they were attacked, they saw one of those Proud Boys go and lean into a patrol car, have a conversation with an officer, and then walk away. The officer never responded to the attack on them. We see this time and time again at the Queer Liberation Marches, as my colleague as my friend from the LGBT Center mentioned, with cops sort of laying in wait for the end of our march and then attacking people over a Sharpie written on a car. We saw it most recently last Thursday at a gathering in honor of the gentleman who was killed in Rochester, and police officers escorted a group of counter-protesters who were pro-Trump away from our area and then put them in their car, which they then promptly used to drive right into us. In 2006, the FBI under George W. Bush issued a report stating that white supremacists were infiltrating law enforcement. I shared in the Q&A a link to the most recent study by the Brennan Center for Justice on that subject. Until the CCRB, the mayor's office, until the city council deals with the presence of white supremacists actively working in law enforcement in our city, none of these issues are going to ever be dealt with. Something has to be done. Thank you for your time.
Surely, and again, I would encourage you, as I've encouraged the other speakers, and encourage you to encourage your community, that everyone who has an experience with the NYPD that they consider appropriate, please file a complaint with the CCRB. It's the way we can best engage the department and fulfill our mission and our responsibility to you and to the city. Are there any other comments or questions? All right, I'm going to ask for our next speaker.
Next, we have Lizzie Alvarado.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, yes. I'm actually just commenting to follow up on a question that I had that actually corresponds well to this conversation as well about accessibility to the CCRB. I asked earlier this summer at one of the public meetings if the CCRB is planning on extending its current policy about taking complaints over the phone to when hopefully the coronavirus pandemic ceases. Again, I just want to emphasize that this is a much more accessible way for people to be putting in complaints rather than having to actually go in person or to a satellite office, and especially given so many of the concerns that have been mentioned tonight by different speakers about differing levels of comfort with the system broadly, and especially police officers, it might be advisable that this policy continues even without the coronavirus. So I'd love to hear any updates there and any possible events that you might have to get the community's feedback on that. Thank you.
Thank you. John, do you want to talk about this at all?
So we have not yet determined exactly how we will continue once the pandemic ends, how we will continue the remote interviewing of civilian and members of service. But I think it is something that is here to stay in many ways, because it is, I think people are going to find it effective for time and getting people to be able to file their complaints and make their statements in a rapid way. We still need to be cognizant of the fact that people don't have equal access to technology and to phones and to ways to connect remotely. And so we still need to have that ability for people to come in and have in-person contact with the agency.
Thank you. Well, there are other comments, and I think someone has an open mic and you're typing. So if you could make sure that all the mics are muted, that would be appreciated. Any other comments? All right, Yahira?
Thank you, Chair. Next up, I just want to acknowledge that, oh, sorry, just lost it. Just want to acknowledge that Public Advocate Williams' office is also in attendance, Kadeem Robinson, and finally we'll be hearing from John Sonda.
Hi, I'd just like to alert the people that the first three general public speakers spoke 34 seconds, 56 seconds, and 28 seconds over the 2-minute limit. So just giving you that information. Mr. Davey, during the August 6, 2020 CCRB board meeting, you stated, "So email me your complaint. I will respond and refer it to the appropriate agency." Mr. Davey, when did you refer my complaint to the appropriate agency, and have you or the CCRB received a response from that agency as of yet?
I think I was pretty clear with you at the last meeting that I read your complaint and there's no further action needed on it.
But before that, you informed me that if I sent you the evidence that you would refer it to the appropriate agency. Did you do that?
There's no need to.
So for the record, Mr. Davey, after receiving my complaint by email, as you instructed me to do, you're declining to refer the complaint to the appropriate agency, even though you specifically stated that you would provide said evidence to the appropriate agency for an investigation. Is that correct?
There is nowhere for that complaint to go. So it's not going anyplace.
So the information that Executive Director Darsh provided me, and you confirmed that the Department of Investigations is not the appropriate agency for investigation of a violation of a CCRB. Excuse me, I'm still speaking. It's not an appropriate agency for investigation of a violation of CCRB charter. There's not a complaint to refer to any. No, I'm asking a general question now. Is that the appropriate agency to provide evidence of a violation of CCRB charter?
If there is an alleged violation that has substance, then it would be referred. There's nothing in your complaint that has any substance.
Okay. For the record, during the August 12, 2020 CCRB board meeting, Director Darsh with a full statement. In response to the question, based upon your knowledge, has the CCRB ever opened and conducted an investigation into members of the NYC after the Executive Director himself determined that the complaint was not in the CCRB's jurisdiction? Executive Director Darsh responded, "The complaint was not in our jurisdiction." No. Please be advised that at the August 6th board meeting, a total of 6 days prior to the August 12th board meeting, I read an email from Mr. Darsh that stated, "I just wanted to let you know that we have reopened that request that Christina sent me on 1/27/17. I denied the reconsideration and request on this same day." Executive Director Darsh had determined that the complaint was not
Under you've got 10
seconds,
and then your mic be
CCRB did not conduct an investigation after 1/27/17, which makes his answer on August 12th untrue. Mr. Davis, what did you already to hire and fire the Executive Director of the CCRB?
Would you mute the speaker's mic? Thank you. Do we have other speakers, Yahira?
Yes, I just wanted to quickly call on staff from Assemblymember Al Taylor, Mina White. She wanted to send some regards before concluding.
Sure.
Hi, Mina White from Assemblyman Taylor's office. The Assemblymember was on previously. Unfortunately, he had to attend to an event. He had to attend to a urgent personal matter, but thank you all for all the testimony. It was extremely necessary for these conversations to be had and for those recommendations to be had when we're speaking about transgender experiences, when we're speaking about LGBTQIA experiences and how we interact and speak on those experiences and how they are addressed, and making sure that they're addressed equitably. So thank you all for this.
Thank you, and thanks to the elected officials' interest and in this issue and support for the agency. Any other comments, questions? Is there any new business to come before the board?
So, Mr. Davies, sorry, before we conclude, just wanted to read some testimony from Councilmember Drum's office before we move on. Is that
Sure.
okay?
Yes.
Dear Mr. Darsh, Chair Davey, and members, thank you for including LGBTQI+ issues in today's meeting agenda. I recognize your efforts and encourage you to implement further programs and processes that will improve how the CCRB interacts with our community. In particular, I ask that you accurately collect demographic data on the sexual orientation and gender identity of complainants. This means not simply relying on individuals to initiate discussion of their identities, but rather asking everyone. I noticed that the online complaint form offers the relevant questions, and I hope that these questions are asked of all complainants, no matter how they submit their complaints. In addition, would you consider harmonizing the answer options with Local Law 128 of 2016? The CCRB should implement gender, racial, and LGBTQIA+ equity training for all employees. Although the concern with equity pertains to all city agencies, the issue is especially important in the context of criminal justice, as queer lives have been and sadly continue to be criminalized. Several other New York City agencies have already conducted training pursuant to Local Law 175 of 2007 and could be helpful in your efforts. I ask that the CCRB review how it handles all complaints that allege anti-LGBTQIA+ bias. Such a review would include a study of the efficacy of any NYPD training that may be part of disciplinary recommendations. I request that the CCRB conduct a thorough investigation into why certain precincts, including the 115th precinct in my district, have a much higher proportion of LGBTQIA+ complainants. I hope that CCRB will play a role in changing the culture of the NYPD by speaking out against patterns of anti-LGBTQIA+ misconduct. I strongly encourage sustained engagement with the LGBTQIA+ community and my office, and welcome any questions or concerns you may have. Sincerely, Daniel Drum, Chair of the New York City Council LGBTQ Caucus.
That testimony is entered, and I will let John speak to this, but we will work with the staff to review the letter in detail and make any adjustments, either in policy or practice that are appropriate. John, do you want to comment? And then I'll open it up to you.
So I think the council members' points on training are very well taken, and we will work with agencies that he suggests to get that kind of training for our staff. And I think the other points he makes, again, as one of the earlier speakers made, about how we have to ask questions to everyone and not just people who self-identify as members of the trans community, is a point well taken, and it's a step that we should be able to remedy quickly. And we'll talk to staff about getting on that soon.
Great, thank you. Other comments, questions? Other speakers, Shahira?
That concludes the portion.
Thank you. So any new business to come before the board? Any old business to come before the board? Is there a motion then to adjourn to executive session? Ms. Simmons makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And it has been seconded by Mr. Rivadeneira. All those in favor of adjourning to executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then we are adjourned. I want to thank the public again, thank the staff, thank all the elected officials, and and everyone for the way in which you work with this agency to continue to improve the relationship between the NYPD and the community, and to help us better adjudicate complaints that you submit to the agency, and particularly as it relates to the LGBTQIA plus community as well. So thank you all, and we are adjourned to executive session.